What's up, everybody? Welcome to a primary source walkthrough, this time for George Washington's farewell address, which he delivered in 1796. This is perhaps one of the most famous presidential farewells in American history, and it comes after Washington relinquished power. Now, until the 20th century, there were no term limits on presidents. Uh, George Washington could have run for a third term. He decided not to. And typically, the narrative is that George Washington wanted to set a precedent for the transition of power um, after two terms, and most presidents only did serve 2 terms. It wasn't until the 1930s and 40s with Franklin Roosevelt during the Great Depression and World War II that we saw a president serve more than 2 consecutive terms. Franklin Roosevelt was elected to 4 consecutive terms, and after uh, he died in 1945, and Harry Truman took over. Um, Obviously, he wasn't president anymore, but following Truman's presidency, when Dwight Eisenhower was president, the Republican controlled Congress and presidency under Eisenhower passed the 22nd Amendment, which limited a president to 2 terms, making Washington's example the legal law, or the law of the land, I should say. So, Washington was actually modeling himself, so he says, on the Roman hero Cincinnatus. And to make a very long story short, Rome, during it when it was a republic, before it became an empire, had several different political offices, and one of those political offices was the office of dictator. Now, this doesn't necessarily mean that he was like Hitler or something. That's not what we're getting at here. But a dictator in the Roman Republic was an emergency position when someone of military means and knowledge was needed to lead the Republic against a threat, um, and then lay down power. So Cincinnatus was elected dictator during a moment of crisis. The crisis passed, and Cincinnatus laid down his power and went back to farming. That's kind of what Washington is modeling himself off of here. Now, there are others who suggest that Washington probably couldn't have been elected to a third term. He had a lot of crises, especially the Whiskey Rebellion, um, where he had to send in federal troops to put down a rebellion of people upset about attacks on whiskey, um, instituted by Washington's Secretary of the Treasury, Alexander Hamilton. In any case, Washington's speech, speaking of Hamilton, was immortalized again in the Hamilton movie. It's a really wonderful piece of music, sung powerfully by Christopher Jackson. And Lin Manuel Miranda, he's there too, but Chris Jackson really steals the show with that. Um, if you pay attention to politics too, when Obama's second term was winding down, um, Miranda and Chris Jackson performed that song at the White House. It was a really powerful moment. In any case, let's get into the speech itself. So, Washington here is going to give us 2 really important pieces of advice. And there's a third thing that we're going to talk about as well. But the most important things that you need to get out of this speech are these 2 key pieces of advice. So he begins by kind of giving context for what he's doing, He's saying, well, I want to honor my country because my country has honored me. And he basically says, I can't stop thinking about how you still need my advice. So I'm going to give you my advice, um, and you should listen to it. So he immediately identifies the dangers of parties in the state. And he does not mean people who are throwing back Miller Lights um, at the state house. What he means here are political parties. And he says that there are so many different local interests and views, and that the formation of these political parties are dangerous. And the reason why they're dangerous, he says, is because when there's this alternate domination of one faction over the other, sharpened by the spirit of revenge, natural to party dissension, which in different ages and countries has perpetrated, the most horrid enormities, is itself a frightful despotism. What he's saying, essentially, is that when we have these factions that are warring for political power, policy isn't going to necessarily be in the best interest of the people, but in the spirit of revenge of one party doing something to another. So, if you want a modern example, right now, there is uh, a person whose name is Amy Coney Barrett, who has been nominated by the President of the United States to take a spot on the Supreme Court after Ruth Bader Ginsburg died several weeks ago. Now, the spirit of party that Washington is talking about here is kind of on display because the Supreme Court has been a major touching point, and the courts in general have been a major political touching point of rancor between the Republican and Democratic parties because of actions that the Republican Party took at the end of Obama's term, and namely, the during Obama's last term, he nominated a man named Merrick Garland to fill the seat vacated by Antonin Scalia when Scalia died. And he did this in February of 2016. Obama did. And the Senate, led by Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, refused to hold hearings for Mr. Garland. And so now here we are, 3 weeks away from a presidential election, and the Republican Party is trying to get their nominee confirmed. And so there's a bit of give and take there, and then the threat is if they do indeed put Barrett on the court, that they're going to pack the Democrats will pack the court by adding seats, and then the Republicans come back and say, well, if you add seats, then we'll add seats when we're in power again, and it's just this big back and forth. So that's kind of, I think, what Washington is talking about here, or healthcare passes, or the Affordable Care Act passes in 2009, 2010, and now the last decade of our politics has centered around either supporting the Affordable Care Act or trying to get it destroyed. Which also ties into the Supreme Court nomination. In any case, enough about modern politics. Washington is going to take a little break here, and he is going to talk about morality and its connection with religion. And here, he's not necessarily saying that the United States needs to have an official religion, but he is saying essentially that morality cannot exist without religious principle, which is a very kind of enlightenment thing to say, and we need to take stock of that. Whether you believe that morality is impossible without religion or not, that's up to you. But Washington is calling it into question here. He's saying you cannot have morality without religion. In any case, one other thing that comes out of his statement that morality and religion come together is he does make an appeal for education, and he says that, look, if we're going to have a populace that engages with the government, we need to make sure that they're educated. That's what he's saying here. It is essential that public opinion should be enlightened. He means educated, not, achieve the enlightenment of the Buddha. In any case, his second piece of advice is to avoid foreign influence. And this comes at a time when the United States is fighting influence of both Britain and France. Britain, of course, has a long connection to the American colonies, since that's where the American colonies got their start. But France is also, wanting to have the United States support in its own revolution and rebellion. In any case, Washington he understood that siding with one, Britain or France, would piss off the other, so he decided to draft a statement of neutrality to kind of try to walk the line and stay out of it. And he has good reasons for doing so. He basically says that if you are going to get entangled with one, you're eventually going to piss off the other, and that's only going to lead to more and more misery. Or as he says, it's excessive partiality for one foreign nation and excessive like of another cause those whom they actuate to see danger only on one side, and to serve to veil and even second the arts of influence on the other. Saying, look, if you side with one, it's not just going to be a problem because you're going to piss the other one off, but there are people in the United States who are going to support Britain more than they support France, or France more than they support Britain, and that's going to mean that they're going to see boogeymen from the other side, even if they're not there, and that could provide some danger. I mean, think about the way that we talk about Russia and China in our modern politics now. So he says the advice he has: have as little political connection as possible with them. We already have some foreign engagements. We'll honor them, but let's stop there. And he says we should have trade relationships with them, but in terms of politics and alliances, that's a fool's game. So, of course, no one listens, because we in America have to do things the hard way. And a lot of the story of the early republic, especially during the Adams administration, is one of rising political parties and continued foreign entanglements. So we'll go ahead and leave it there. I hope that you enjoyed this primary source. It's one of my favorites, to be sure. I love digging into it, and I think it gets people thinking a lot about not just the early republic, but stuff that's going on in our modern world too. So we'll go ahead and sign off there. If you have any questions about Washington's farewell address, feel free to reach out to me. I hope you all are doing well, that you're staying healthy, and I'll see you for the next one.